Yep, you're learning. That's what we're here to learn. Well, I see who's gonna be the spokesman for today. Spokeswoman. No, of course. Appreciate it. I guess there is questions, just call me. kino, išmokyti humorą.
Sveiki, draugai.
You have to go to a friend easily.
But don't worry, you look amazing.
Wait, I didn't find it. Not ready. You press it, you know why?
Because you
The
want to
cameras can see us.
and be careful.
Because we're like, no time.
Bet jie ten fiziškai sėdė? Dabar. Okay. Tai padarom, kad tai būtų puslapį tada susitinėlį.
Is it a rhetorical question?
One big joke. Joke would be better than like Brigita įsipristatinėt. Bet ne mūsų spoksumas.
Geriau įventę ir geriau Futurepreneurs puslapį.
Žinai, šiaip dažnai atstovais būdų penčina, apie ką šnekė.
Ten gali klausyti.
Duoda reikia daryti, kad paskui galėtum nueiti pasitinėti, kaip spėdėti. Okay.
Nu tai gal važiuojam jau, nes kažkaip tais... Ar dar palauk, pasukalbės.
Tai reiškia, ne toks geras, kad vėliau.
Kaip jam patinka šitas mėgstas?
O galo parodė, nėra lygantis žydas. Turbūt čia atrodo, kad zodiako ženklas. Tai jau parašyti į mūsų apie mūsų grupę.
No pressure. Hi everyone, my name is Andrius Juozapaitis. As you can see, I had the innovation function at Lietuvos Energija group, which is a group of 20 or so integrated energy companies. Energy is usually not the business that's considered the most dynamic, entrepreneurial and innovative. And I joined LE 2 years ago to basically challenge that fact and try to change it. So before we jump into today's session about the customer value proposition, I kind of want to give you a brief about what we are doing, so you can maybe have a context and slightly trying to understand the angle that I'm coming from, because doing a Snapchat is different from doing an energy storage business or a startup. So we'll run through that briefly, and then we'll jump into the CVP discussion. It's going to be interactive, so I will kind of like to understand who you are and what type of projects you're working on. Because we have 2 hours, we'll try to make it, into more of a discussion and an exercise rather than a one to the other presentation. So let's dive in. So in terms of innovations, we're launching a new platform that we call LE 4.0 Hub. The 4.0 is a reference to Industry 4.0, so everything that's happening with data, sensors, machine intelligence, artificial learning, and so on and so forth. And what we do within the LE4 Hub, or what it combines, is basically our digital transformation program. So we are trying to move from sort of a physical realm to the digital realm to some extent. It combines the stuff that we're doing in R&D and pre-commercial procurement. We have 2 projects that have to do with electricity metering infrastructure and using drones for our grid network. Come on, yeah, okay. So roughly a fourth, okay. Everyone else, is it that you still need more analysis, or is it that someone else has to be responsible for the problem, or are you just here for the fun? No, come on, speak up. It's all right. It's all right. So the ones that didn't raise their hands, what's the issue with not having your problem determined? Any takes?
Not everybody is here to create a startup.
Okay.
I think some people are just guests here.
Okay. So there's what's the mix of people working on a startup project and just learning? Who's here to learn? Just to kind of get experience. Okay, understood. So there's a bit of both. As for the MVP, the same question. Who has really kind of nailed down their MVP and they know what needs to be done or have already done it? Raise of hands. Okay? Okay, a few. All right, so depending on your progress with the first 2 topics, today is either going to be productive or not, because it kind of builds up. So, you won't solve all the problems in the world through one session or one day. The customer value proposition is basically a combination of things. And the way that you get to it is very close related to, or uses a lot of kind of, structured thinking. So basically, if you're good at maths, you're probably going to be good at this. And this is what they don't teach you at school, that, a lot of people ask, oh, why do I need differential equations? I won't use them in my life. No, it's not the differential equations that you need, it's the thinking that you need. It's how you tackle a problem, how you deconstruct into separate elements, and then how you solve for each of those elements, and combine it into a bigger picture. So the customer value proposition is basically a thing that consists of one way of thinking about it, of three parts. It's the pain, which you can define in various ways. It can be the problem, it can be some kind of an issue, it can be a market inefficiency. It's basically some sort of a problem statement. So if you have done your homework in the first session, you will basically kind of have a good feeling of what that pain, the problem is. The second bit, which is usually quite tricky, is the painkiller. So basically, when you know the pain, you kind of have to address it with something. So the painkiller is the solution, whether it's software, whether it's a market thing, whether it's an innovation. It's basically your way to address the pain that you have identified. Now, the tricky thing is when you're building a business, it's sometimes very evident what the pain and the painkiller is. When you're trying to innovate, you kind of feel what doesn't work and ways of trying to solve it. But then the challenge is how do you build the business around it, or how do you get the funding or convince the partners to kind of let you construct the painkiller. And this is where the third part comes in. This is the secret sauce. The trick with the secret sauces and the problem, especially in a young startup ecosystem like Lithuania, is that we kind of forget the secret sauce and we don't understand where it comes from. And usually it can be luck, but most of the times, 99 out of 100 is hard work. So when you're here, it's very difficult for you to come up with the secret sauce sitting in this session right now. Usually the secret sauce comes from long work hours, lots of experience, speaking with a lot of people, and deconstructing things to the basic sort of level of how they work. So you won't come up with the secret sauce just yet, most likely, but you do have to understand that if you want to pitch your idea and you want to get funding, you want to get something done, you will most likely have to find the secret sauce. So the secret sauce is basically usually some kind of an unfair advantage that you have in the team. Sometimes it can be knowledge, sometimes it could be your finesse with a specific tool, a programming framework maybe, your understanding of a market, of a specific business, maybe it's a first mover's advantage and no one is doing that. The issue again is when people are told to find the secret sauce, they usually kind of like lie a bit, they just tick the mark and they say, oh yeah, I'm doing this app first. Honestly, no one gives a crap about your app because no one needs it. And the second person that can come in with good coding experience could do the same app in like 2 minutes. So that's not the secret sauce. It's okay to kind of be really blunt and say, I haven't found my secret sauce yet. I need to do a bit of work to find it. I know that's a challenge and it's going to be worked upon, right? So this is again where the math comes in. When you have, a couple of numbers and an unidentified variable, an x, you kind of try to put the equation together and solve for the x. If you are missing it, do something to find it. But if you do want to get funding, if you do want to move forward, you will have to find some kind of a secret sauce. So let's kind of, put that all together. And once you have all the three parts, you have the internal knowledge or the tools that you need to kind of create the customer value proposition and really nail it. The challenge with the customer value proposition for a startup is usually finding the right mix of how wide it is in terms of its logic and how focused it is so that you are able to execute with limited resources. Because none of you guys, well, maybe some of you do have like, a family business behind you or a wealth fund that can give you millions of euros. But if that were the case, you would probably be doing that now. So you're not here because you have, millions of euros or dollars behind you to, construct some software or some hardware. You're probably here because you kind of want to get to that place. So investors and businesses and corporates, they like funding stuff that is exact, that they understand, that they kind of get how you're going to execute it. So getting the right customer value proposition is important because you have to show the potential of what you're doing, but also show your focus And in a lot of the cases that I've seen where people pitch, you know, they come and they start like wording or mentioning features and how much potential this has and how this is going to solve the world. And that's not really how things happen. So, you know, there's companies that are employing tens and hundreds of thousands of employees, and they're not doing that. And probably there's a reason why they're not doing that. So if you come in with a group of 5 students and you say, oh, I'm going to solve this, you probably have to have some good backing for that argument to convince me that there's 1,000 people in Silicon Valley doing that, and there's 5 that are going to be more successful than them. So I don't want to bring you down, but to some extent I want to bring you down to earth. Right, so having that said, let's move to kind of towards breaking this down. So one way of thinking about what a business is the ICP methodology, or the ideal customer profile. This is again important, coming back to the idea of focus. Once you start a project, you start a small business, you cannot do everything, right? So if you know who your ideal customer is, you can really focus on nailing your value proposition for that customer, so you actually get the business, you get the cash flows, you get the product, things start picking up, you get stuff moving, and then you can get more financing, you can scale up, and so on and so forth. So the ICP methodology basically says that you have to start with really understanding what your customer is, what they want, how they operate. And you have to understand that the ICP methodology is not like a silver bullet that unlocks the potential of setting up any business in the world. It's just a method of how to think about constructing a business, constructing a project, and it's a process as well. It's not that you kind of did this exercise once in this room and you're good to go, that's it. It's more a method of thinking, and you need to iterate. You need to kind of, every time you do some stuff, you make a few assumptions, you go out into the real world, usually these assumptions get, they crash and burn, and you need to update the assumptions, adjust them, and do that exercise again. So that's why starting a business, doing a new project, launching a venture is difficult, because you kind of assume that you're the Superman in this world, you have this amazing idea, and then you go out into the world and someone says you're stupid. And then you need to come back to the drawing board, take that feedback into account, don't take it as personal criticism, take it as constructive feedback, update, and come out into the world again. Some people nail it in 2 iterations, some people nail it in 3, some people build a billion-dollar business in 30 iterations. So the question is, are you here to kind of go through the process, or are you here to give up after the second try? Both answers are valid, answer them for yourselves. So in order to nail kind of down the ICP, you need to understand a couple of things. So you need to start thinking about the psychology of your customer. It's really important because things happen in the world for a reason, and things happen because of people making decisions. So if you can understand the psychology of those people, you can really start thinking about how that psychology can be used to create a solution to scale the business, to sell your product. Another important item is to understand the habits as well as the choice drivers of the people that you're interacting with. So I'll give you an example. Sometimes you can have an amazing product that you're selling to a business, and let's say there's someone in a bank somewhere that that has a target of giving out X amount of loans to their customers. And you come to them and you say, look, I'm giving you this, this great tool. Your communication will become a lot more efficient in the bank. You'll save so much more time. You won't need to do reporting at all. And you think that you have a great value proposition for them. The problem is that that person is not really interacting that much within the bank, and he talks to the people at, let's say a private wealth office, and his bonus is based on how many kind of loans he gives out, or how many incoming funds he gets. So despite you having a great tool, the person may kind of either say, yeah, I'm interested, and then not do anything to follow up, or the person may kind of say, yeah, it's a great tool, but I don't really care. So a lot of times we get the situation where people come to someone with a great product, but that great product isn't really driving their behavior. I would like to have, you know, all the best apps in the world, but if I don't use those apps for my work, then, you know, after a while or so, I'll drop them, and I won't, you know, I won't follow up, and I won't care if you will be selling me a better app if I don't use those apps, because if I don't need them, then I don't care about them. So understanding the habits and, you know, what drive, especially when you're selling B2B, when you're selling to middle managers, specialists, kind of business unit owners, you really have to understand what drives these people. And it's usually, you know, greed, bonuses, or just, it can be greed, or it can be, you know, providing for your family, you know, depends on how you look at it. But it's basically these drivers either can make your business or break your business. For B2C is a bit different, because the wider your audience is, the larger the kind of types of drivers, and the bigger the pool of psychological signals that you need to take into account.
I have a question.
Sure.
Regarding psychology. What type of psychology are you talking about? About enterprise psychology or personal psychology?
Well, it really depends whether it's B2C or B2B, right?
B2B, of course. We're talking about B2B.
So yeah, it's also on a personal level. For example, I get a lot of B2B kind of requests of technology companies selling stuff. And I assume that they have some sort of a sales process where they say, we need to get to the business unit managers in various companies, and we need to send an email to them. So they check out our product, and then we organize a call. It's a good assumption. The problem is that the way that they present the product is basically an email of about 15 minutes. So as soon as I see that email, I close it immediately, because it's a cold incoming mail, and I don't have, as a business unit manager, I don't have time to open a random 15-minute email, because I've planned my time throughout the day, and I have 15 minutes for all the emails, right? So that means that whoever is on top of that sales process, that person doesn't really understand the organizations that are supposed to buy from them. So again, understanding, you know, who your decision maker is, who your buyer is, and how they operate is really important. And again, we can come back to this session today. You won't probably make the right assumption here. That's why it makes sense to go out into the real world, to do internships, to get work experience, and you start understanding how organizations operate. If you worked in business, then it's much easier to sell to business, because you understand how the incentives, how the KPIs, how the decisions are made, how technologies are procured, how services are procured, how products are procured. That's why, you know, it's great to hear a story about Mark Zuckerberg and him being a dropout from Harvard and so on, but in reality, business happens because of knowledge. So you need to get a way to tap into that knowledge. You don't need to get it yourself. I mean, if you can convince that you have a great vision and you get a person in your team with that knowledge, great. But you will have to get to that knowledge to deliver a solution, to like really understand what the problem is, and then how can you help in addressing that problem. So the third bit, incentives, kind of really ties into what, you know, to the habits to some extent. Because, for example, we work with innovation in Elite Group, right? It's a huge group of companies, and let's say, you know, a couple of companies have over 500 or over 1,000 employees, and they have their daily business. And it's the same thing. We come with an innovation, and we have to sell to them. So it means that they have to be doing whatever they're doing, and then they need to come and, you know, get the solution and integrate it on top of what they're doing. If they are bonused or incentivized by the functional work that they're doing, each time they'll face a challenge of implementing our innovation without an incentive, they will drop it, because they will prefer to do the stuff that they do that they're incentivized for. So it's the same thing with a lot of clean tech innovations and these sort of, you know, green ideas. It kind of sounds like a good idea, but then when you put it in the real world, there's reasons why things happen, and as soon as the person is facing a challenge, the person that is trying to take up your product or service, as soon as they face one challenge, they think, you know, why our brain operates in this way, like, let's choose the easiest way out. Why should I put in effort when I can not put in effort? And that is where your kind of, your value proposition, your business breaks down, because no one really wants that. No one really wants to go the hard way. So it's up to you to kind of nail down how the people are incentivized. That's why, to some extent, doing B2B is easier, because it's more like it's a smaller amount of agents that you need to understand. A business usually works in a relatively structured manner. So you get some experience, you understand the process, and then you start improving it. If you want to build a global company for B2C, you have to understand lots of different things. So it depends. It's not really a general kind of insight, and you shouldn't really care whether like, oh, no, I'll do a business in B2B. I think that's not the point. The point is that whatever you choose to do, whatever drives you as an entrepreneur, as a team, as a business person, whatever that drives you, you kind of have to focus on that. But then if you're doing B2B, there's certain things that you need to do. And then if you're doing B2C, there's certain other things that you need to do and take into account. So having that said, the idea is that you combine all of this research, right? So we'll do a couple of exercises today. And again, I want to point out that the point of today is kind of to give you the method, but you won't solve everything or solve for everything in this room. So once you have that method, it's up to you to kind of use it in the real world, to iterate and update whatever assumptions or content that you put down in your notes. So let's move on, let's move closer to the exercise. So as I said, it's really important for whatever business that you're doing or whatever project idea that you have to kind of understand what the focus is. And some of your projects you can say, oh yeah, it's both. So I'm not really constrained. Again, if you come to pitch to an investor, they will most likely not enjoy that idea, because as I said, the key constraint for a startup is resources. If you're doing B2C and B2B at the same time, it will most likely mean in the real world that you will have to set up two separate sales organizations, one for B2C and one for B2B. As a startup, you don't have resources for that. So you need to focus. You need to show that either for B2B or for B2C, your value proposition works, your product has take-up, and then, then it can be scaled up by investing more resources into it. So you have to answer to yourself whether your product is B2B, whether it's B2C. It can be B2G, which is business to government, which I wouldn't advise, because the government procures stuff via public procurement. Just to give you an example, I mentioned pre-commercial procurement. It's a vehicle in Lithuania and throughout across the European Union that the public sector came up to say, if you have a public company or a public institution, they should do innovations as well. So pre-commercial procurement is a way to buy technologies or kind of ask for technologies that don't exist in the market yet. So it has to be something that you cannot buy off the shelf. And it's a great idea, right? It allows public institutions to innovate. The problem is that the process in a public institution to get this done lasts 3 years. So whatever innovation we can think of today, if it's going to be 3 years until that innovation comes into force, it's probably not going to be an innovation. Given the speed at how things operate today, it's challenging. So when you're trying to sell to B2G, you have to understand that your sales cycles will be massive. And you'll have to work around institutions, you'll have to convince stakeholders. Every 4 years in Lithuania, the government changes, so whatever guy or gal you knew, they probably get kicked out, and you need to develop a new relationship. It's hard. So if you want to get funding, there's different types of funding as well. If you want to go for grant funding, if you go for social funds, yes, you can get funding to do great stuff in B2G, and you shouldn't be discouraged from that. But do understand that if you want to get private funding, venture capital, B2G is probably a very difficult field to get that done. Lastly, I kind of put in peer-to-peer as well. I mean, in Lithuania, welcome to Cryptomania. In 8 years, our startups raised 180 million euros. ICOs raised over 200 million euros in 12 months. So obviously, it's not like these two things are not separate. It builds up. But a lot of stuff is happening now with blockchain, with doing decentralized solutions, airdropping tokens, and so on and so forth. So it's a new kind of type of business emerging. We don't have that much experience in actually showing that it works. I mean, probably the best peer-to-peer thing that I can think of is uTorrent, and most of us have used it in Lithuania. So that's probably one good product that I can think of. Everything else is more of a concept, and time will tell whether it will develop further. So moving on now, if we take an ICP for a B2C kind of product, there's a couple of things that you need to think about. So you need to think about, for your ideal customer, what the demographic is. It's really popular nowadays to say, yeah, my app is different because it's for the millennials. Very interesting, very original. It is important. You can make a lot of, you can make a lot of money. There's a lot of fintech innovation now that is saying or targeting millennials. There's a lot of, different type of dating apps, social apps, and so on. But it's up to you. I don't really think that it's really hard to kind of like find the problem that you're solving and really nail it. There's a lot of luck, a big element of like randomness. So given the fact that we have what? Clean tech, ICT, and what's the other track? Social innovation, right? So I wouldn't assume that you will be doing, that many Snapchats or whatever type of apps. If you are, yeah, it's fine, but then you have to really think what the demographic is. Then you have to think about the, demographic is also, the age, the type of person that you're trying to kind of male, female, whether the gender matters or not. It's also the experience, how experienced they are. Are they a professional? Are they a freelancer? Are they a government person, and so on and so forth. And then you have all the even trickier bits. It's hard to kind of define because it's behavior, preference, lifestyle, whether they travel a lot, whether they have time to spend on reading the product, reading about the manual, whether they don't, whether they want something on demand, whether they can wait, whether they prefer something to be really cheap or something to be really of quality, and so on and so forth. So you kind of really have to, it's a bit like acting, because you have to put yourselves in the shoes of your assumed ideal customer and just kind of try to go through the product experience, both the sales experience of your product as well as the kind of the user experience of using the service or the physical product. And an ICP for a B2B is kind of different because you first have to think about what type of industry or vertical your product works for. Sometimes it can work for a lot of industries, so you can say, oh yeah, it's transportation, energy, finance, everyone can use it. Sometimes it only works in a few. So it's really important to kind of understand the industries that you're trying to solve or a problem for or provide your solution for. Then you have to think about the scale of the business. So do you want to sell to large organizations, such as, for example, British Petroleum, who has a team of like 10,000 procurement specialists? Or are you going to sell to small businesses that have one person that's responsible for accounting, procurement, finance, and probably, opening the doors for the boss when the person comes in the morning? So that's really important. Thirdly, it's the budget, So what type of a budget do these organizations have for your solution? Sometimes they don't have a budget at all, which means for B2B it's difficult because you have to work with the client to create that budget, and that extends the sales cycle even further. In other cases, you may be selling a very expensive solution and the organizations that you're targeting just don't have the budgets for this. So whatever kind of budgeting they do, they say, oh yeah, we want to spend 2% of our budget in this, and the solution that you offer is 5%, which means that you have no market. The third part, and we kind of talked about this in the example, is who do you need to kind of like contact, or what channel do you need to sell to get through to the ideal decision makers? So if you're selling a piece of software, a lot of sort of junior sellers kind of expect that, oh, if I pitch this to the board member, they will probably be the ones making the decision. It's not how it works. There's probably an IT office in a larger corporation that is responsible for procuring various types of IT tools. So even if you can convince a board member, the decision won't go through if you won't convince the IT manager. So you have to think about, again, how the real business works and who in that business is making the right decision. And coming back to what we talked about previously, how are they incentivized? If they are bonused by what your solution can bring to them, you won't most likely have a very quick chat until a decision is made. If it's it's like an added extra, a nice to have, but not a must have for them, they will most likely take 3 or 4 iterations to kind of make a go or no go decision. And then it's really important to think about your geographic scope. And this usually grows with ambition, but once you get experience, you kind of really understand that in the Baltic states, in Central Eastern Europe, in some verticals, our markets are relatively underdeveloped. And there's a reason for that, because the purchasing power and the market size is smaller. So as technologies get cheaper, it starts making sense to try to do business in that. So if something was not viable from a financial perspective 5 years ago, the technology costs have gone down enough to maybe try to do it today. So that's why geographic scope is important, because again, as an investor, I really want to understand whether you'll be able to execute. So if you come to me and say, yeah, my market is the whole world, it will most likely be a signal or a message to me that you haven't done your homework, you haven't thought about really how the execution works and where your product would be delivering the most value. So it's again a point of homework that you need to do. So let's move to an exercise. I hope you all have notes, and if you don't have a product, you at least have maybe an idea, an ambition of what you would like to do. So use that as your material, and let's do an exercise, and let's spend maybe not 15 minutes. Let's try to do it in 10, and let's try to nail down what your ICP is. So how many of you are doing stuff in B2C? Raise of hands. Okay, about 10. How many of you are doing stuff in B2B? Oh, roughly the same, okay. Is there anyone in B2G or peer-to-peer? Oh, you're doing everything, or a bit of both?
Yeah, parts of it.
Okay, it's a hybrid thing.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So let's try to spend 10 minutes from now, and really, like, if you're doing B2B or B2C, focus on the bullets and try to nail down, what the person is, what they're doing, how they're making decisions, if it's a person in a company, what their role is, roughly how old they are, and just try to kind of really put notes. Don't be afraid to kind of delete it and update it. Just make a first draft of that right now. All right? And you can, let's have a bit of buzz. Let's, discuss, and you can ask questions, and let's make it interactive. But start thinking and really put it down.
We're all gonna die. I hope so.
Thank you.
Do we have a connection to Kaunas? Is anyone in Kaunas hearing us and looking at us? Okay, so to all the people that are in Kaunas, I am on the Futurepreneurs Facebook page, on the event page. You're doing the same exercise. You're not free to not do it because you're in another city. That's not how it works. Please do the same exercise, and please upload your, in the comments, please upload the definition of your ideal customer profile. So we have, we have a virtual connection. I'll look at it, and we can, we can discuss and exchange feedback. So the homework is for you as well. Do ask questions if you have any. So when you're thinking about experience, for example, think about if you're doing B2C, right? Think about the education, think about kind of, how busy the people are, what type of work they do, and so on. When you're thinking about demographics, think about, whether the people live in the city, whether they live in the rural areas, what gender they are, income, location, and so on. And you can define one type of person, you can define a range if you want, but start off with something written down. It's like life, likes, dislikes, habits, what type of, let's say, cultural heritage maybe, or what type of cultural background, preferences. You can say, there's, for example, apps for hipsters or apps for elderly people or for people that like active lifestyle. Kind of, yeah. What kind of lifestyle and behavior? Behavior can be, whether, for example, you care about social causes, whether you care about politics, you don't care about politics, whether you prefer to read a book, or whether you prefer a digital kind of lifestyle, and so on. It's just trying to understand what type of people your product would kind of impact positively, what people would, depending on how they spend their time, have the both a value, but also the time and the need to kind of interact with your product or your service. So it's quite wide. What type of things what type of product or service are you thinking about?
Wow.
Okay, so right, so in terms of preferences, then you have to think about the people, whether people prefer organic food or whether they prefer quality or they prefer price, whether they like shopping in farmers markets or whether they like to shop in retail stores, whether they probably kind of travel from a rural area to the city or the other way around. So kind of what type of methods they would use to interact with the product or the sales channels that your product is at. Yep. So, for example, would your target customer be like a professional, like a banker, a lawyer, or would it be maybe someone who's a pilot or a farmer, or whether they would be, whether they would be junior, whether they would be educated, uneducated, students, that kind of stuff. How's it going? Has anyone finished? Raise of hands if you finished. Good. Leader. No. Right. Time-wise at least. Time-wise at least. So let's take a few more minutes and let's wrap up with this. All right, let's try to wrap up with the exercise. So I would like now to ask you for the solution that you're working on and the ICP that you have identified. Any volunteers? Okay, all of you should be a volunteer, because if you want to sell your product, if you want to finish up with your project, you always have to raise your hand. Again, any volunteers? Good, let's go. Sure. Okay.
So now the problem is that cups in coffee basically have a part plastic in them,
okay,
which is it's not ecological, which has some issues in the environment. So as you already kind of found on mapping our B2C and B2B, I think because we have both the customer and both the business.
But who are you going to be selling to? Will you be selling to the end person that comes into the coffee shop, or the business that has to kind of put that in their own coffee shop?
Yeah, we're going to serve for business, but now we're thinking in the order about the customer. What kind of customer would be willing to buy this? So, and because of that, we're going to provide some pressure on the business about this thing. So, first thing is both customer and both business, they are ecological, they are socially responsible. They may be innovative because it's a new type of thing. It's not that old stuff like plastic. It's all everywhere, and everyone will use them about that.
Okay.
And they are caring, and in the best part, it may be
Okay.
and as well, we can talk about what the customer and business is not. Because like they are not wasting, not proposing. So the few ways how to do it.
So I think you're kind of, yeah, your reasoning is good because you're trying to, if you're selling to a business, that business has to get a brand that communicates in the right way to the customers. So basically you need to find, you know, coffee shops or chains that have this brand, that care about, you know, the things that you mentioned with regards to greenness, ecology, you know, life cycle economy, and so on and so forth. Good. Anyone else? Go for it.
Sure. So for our ideal customer profile, we're targeting like the B2C, the business to the customer, and the main problem that we're addressing is the low quality of food that's available throughout local communities and the need to get smaller food productions up and running to address that issue. So for the profile for the customer who's going to be buying the food from these small community source organic products, and it's going to be somebody, the demographics is going to be somebody late 20s, most likely around 30 to about 50, middle age kind of. Could be single or have a new family, mostly is going to be living in the city. And then for their experience in buying these organic products, they're going to have market knowledge from their personal experiences, where they bought from before, who they know that's selling it, so they're going to be comfortable navigating a marketplace like that. Their behavior is going to be healthy lifestyles. They're going to be aware of dangers of organic foods, non-organic foods. They're going to know, you know, what they should be buying, when they should be buying. And they're going to be also actively looking for a niche community. So this would be in the health community, whether that's, we call it like hippies, or whether they're specifying a specific dieting trend. They know how to find these niche communities and be a part of it. In their preferences, their purchasing preferences, it's going to be convenience. And what I'm predicting is going to be for convenience app-based, online marketplace-based, not so much farmers market, but more online, because it's easier to connect out to a wider audience that way. And then the lifestyle, even though we're looking at the younger to middle age, they're still going to have established behavior patterns in their day-to-day life, whether that's an established career, have a family, what they're already buying for food, for their groceries. You know, we're looking at people who are pretty much well put together.
Okay, so that's really good, well thought out. Have you thought about the fact, in terms of preferences, that organic food tends to be a lot more expensive than the retail food, which means that the target market that you most likely are looking at is the higher earners. And again, this ties into geography, right? So whether, if it's a business in Lithuania, right? So it's probably going to be someone relatively well off in the cities, in certain parts of the city as well.
Right.
Yeah, so that's an important angle as well. But really good, really thought out based on all the bullets. We can take one more example. I'll check if Kaunas is at all active. If anyone did hear me. If not, I will not believe that they can hear us. So, right, refresh. No, I see 0 comments, I think. I see 2 likes, which is good. Not good enough though. All right, Kaunas, if you can, do put a brief. I understand that if you did it on the note, it takes time to type it up, but just put in your comment like ICP equals and a couple of thoughts. We're gonna look at them at the next exercise, and we can move on from that later. So okay, let's move on. Once you have your ICP, you have to add an additional thing. You have to think about, okay, so you know the who, now you have to think about the why. Why would these people that you thought of as ideal customers would like to get that product? So you know kind of how they live, what they are, what kind of decisions they make. How is your product changing their lives? Why are they better, worse, improved, and so on? So in order to kind of answer the why, you need to formulate a clear and convincing value promise. So you have to understand the value drivers. So if a person, for example, let's take this organic food example. So if a person is educated, relatively well off, has a family, health is probably quite an important thing. So health is an important driver. So that person will most likely care about consuming healthy food that makes them, more energetic, have a better lifestyle, sell the idea. It's a bit of placebo, because if you think that you're feeling well, you are probably feeling a bit better, and the other way around. So you have to kind of think, okay, so if I'm doing organic food, my value proposition probably has to do something with feeling good about yourself, feeling good for the planet, and so on and so forth. The second thing is that you kind of have to show that for whatever value you formulate, it's not just kind of like a marketing trick. You have to show that the product or the service that you're doing is actually doing that. So you have to formulate a belief that you can deliver that value. So it's really cool to say, I'm going to build a hyperloop and it's going to travel like at 20,000 kilometers per mile. Cool, but what do I have to show for that? Have I done any hyper sort of loops before? Have I even built a train that goes at half of that speed? Probably not. So I'm probably a scam, right? So it's the same thing with your product or service. If you want to kind of show that there's value in what you deliver, you have to have substance to support the value delivery. The third important aspect is differentiation. So there's two types of businesses. One type of business is that it already exists and you're trying to kind of come in and outcompete. A lot of people use the word the disruption. Usually it's kind of like, it's a thing that grabs media articles, but real disruption is so difficult to do. So it's more about out-competition than disruption. So if the business already exists, you have to have a differentiator that kind of really sets you apart, and that differentiator has to be connected to the value. So for example, we already have coffee shops that have cups already, right? So your differentiator is that it's organic, it's made from hemp. You have to understand whether that and the price difference between the plastic or the paper cup and your hemp cup is big enough to drive value for the business, right? Will it actually make more people come to the coffee shop? Maybe if you can form it into a product of that sort, maybe yes. If the people don't care, then the businesses won't buy from you either. So this really kind of comes together with what we discussed before, because if you formulate your value promise and how you deliver that value, and if you can set differentiators, it basically like gives you your pain plus painkiller for your specific customer, and the differentiation is usually connected to your secret sauce. So it's either you know more, either you do more, either you have a first mover advantage, or you're just kind of different and interesting, which a lot of us think that we are, but most often we're not. So, exercise number 2. So we talked about your ICP. You do know who the ICP is. Try and define a clear and convincing value promise. Try to support that with something that would make the ICP believe that you can deliver this value, and try to add 1 or 2 factors of differentiation for your product. So let's take 10 more minutes and let's do that. Feel free to buzz around, discuss, ask questions. 10 minutes, let's get it down, noted on the paper as well.
We send you
he sees once and never two, and never three, and never he's an issue.
Žinai, kaip sakoma, svarbu ne pačiam blogai. Rimtas žmogus pavaido. Extra.
You stuck? Are you good? Is anyone stuck? No? Maybe? What you're stuck on? Sometimes the point of this exercise is to think of a new product or pivot. That's why you're doing it. So this okay. So like a concierge service for all the stuff that you don't want to do.
Yeah, we don't want to do something that we really want to borrow and something like that.
Okay.
And it's like, we know why we want to use it, how to make it seem like why you should use it.
So take your friend and really need to be, again, able to go through this iteration. So if you came up with an idea, it's a process. Came up with one, it doesn't really work, pivot to the next one. Update it, upgrade it, find the niche. So don't look at this as an exercise to kind of prove your idea. Look at this as an exercise to find the right idea. And don't be afraid to change it as you go along the way. That's the key point. To think about it, pivot and change it. All right, let's wrap up. So I'm really curious about this peer-to-peer plus B2C idea. I'm really curious about your idea about the problem and the painkiller that you're solving for. So let's try to do it like this. So if you form the value the value promise and the belief that you are kind of delivering that value, it will be really structured similarly to like pain, painkiller, secret sauce. So go. What's your pain? What's the painkiller? And what's your secret sauce?
So the pain too small for business to create their own and to start selling their products. Either it's like 2 sweaters per year or something like that.
Not enough scale.
Yeah, exactly. So that would be like our place where you can buy and make things.
Okay.
So it's one part of this because actually we thought that we have 6 huge parts. And we made out of the 3 of that it would be like extra, and with 3 of those parts we go
Core.
to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So one of that main part out of 3. So actually the thing is that you cannot sell anywhere, or you don't know, you have lack of knowledge. Then the painkiller, you are coming to us, you are giving your productions to us, and we can sell, or we can give you a place where you can sell by yourself. So it's like kind of few ways to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, so and our secret sauce, so that would be a very specific environment for that deals to happen.
Okay. So you kind of want to provide like a market, but also like an e-commerce solution of some extent to people that really like produce maybe handmade stuff in small quantities to sell it online, basically. Huh? Okay.
And you sort of like very unique things in this market.
And the peer-to-peer side comes from the fact that they would be selling to each other, or how does that?
Actually, business to government, because we from another 2 parts, where is the greenhouse and all these sustainable solutions for planting green places in the cities. So this is managing the government in order to
Oh, so it's the B2G, not peer-to-peer. It's B2G.
Yes.
The government is.
that part.
Oh, okay. Okay. Okay, interesting. So when you're thinking about the secret sauce, if people are if people are making something, think about the solutions that already are out there. One thing is obviously eBay, but there's a lot of various type of different auction websites, right? Some of them work, some of them don't. So you really need to find, so you need to find again the secret sauce. And I think you are onto something there when you say like, we're going to focus on a specific demographic. That's usually a good idea to say like eBay is trying to cover everything, but not necessarily it works for everyone. So we're going to work with maybe, I don't know, people that do pottery, but then you have to really prove that for the pottery people, eBay doesn't work and your solution will work. So again, it's, the belief of the value delivery has to be there. But good stuff. All right, so this exercise is just half of the idea that you need to kind of put in your heads. So again, it's really important to kind of think about it, structure your thoughts, put them down on notes, on paper, erase something, update it. But the way this sort of updating happens is through a process that's called basically validation. So I think my pointer has died, so can we, there's a PC here, so I'll probably switch it like that. Yeah. So the key point is that you have to validate whatever you assume right now. And our problem usually as young entrepreneurs, even as old entrepreneurs, as experienced entrepreneurs, that again, we fall in love with our ideas. We kind of think, oh yeah, I spent so much time thinking about this, this must be great. Usually it's not. And the only way that you can find that something is great is by speaking to your customers. So whatever you drew up and whenever you're kind of making assumptions, the process works in such a way that you have to assume, then you have to go out there and you have to validate. And usually it doesn't work. Once that happened, you have to come back to the drawing board, improve whatever your assumptions were, and go out to validate again. And then you need to improve again, and validate again, and so on. So it's a circle until you get there. So the key point now is that we still have time. So your task now is to, because we all have phones, call someone that is as close as possible to your ICP, tell them your value proposition, your assumption of their pain, your painkiller and your secret sauce, and ask them if they would be interested and get their feedback. Think of a person in 10 minutes, call them, you have to explain your solution, like start training to pitch painkiller, secret sauce. It's like a 2-minute conversation. Call them, tell them, look, I have this idea. I think you would be interested in this. If I would create a business out of this, would this work? If you're doing B2B, just call some smart entrepreneurial person that you know and tell them to assume that they're a business owner and ask them. And you have to kind of start fighting with your emotions, because I know that you don't want to do this, because you don't want to call a smart person and kind of, be in this position when you're one down and you're asking for a favor. But this is how business works. If you want to get something done, you will have to be going out and constantly asking and getting the feedback. So 10 minutes, think of someone you want to call, don't overthink it, call them, ask, and put down the feedback. And then you will have to share. All right? Don't use Facebook. Don't use Facebook to write. Do a voice thing. It has to be like one-on-one feedback. Ideally, you would go out into the street and do it, but we don't have 2 hours. We have 10 minutes. So that's why we have the phones. Ring them, explain your idea, ask them what they think, what the feedback is, would they buy it, does it work, does it make sense? Yep. Kaip nori.
Kadangi mes su energija matome, kaip Lietuvos energija, Vilniaus energija savo kasinius, tai realiai galim vėl skambinti.
Super, jo. No. Pitch me. Pasišnekam.
Įsivaizduoju tokia, kad naudojant magnetų jėgą išgauti energiją.
Okay.
Vykstant ratui ir ko mes manome, kad tai galėtų būti alternatyva šiuolaikiniam energijai, tai yra kad pigesnė ir galbūt paprastesnė, efektyvesnė priemonė. Nei šiandieninis naudojimas, nes normaliai. Ko reikalauja, čia galbūt inžinieriai daugiau paaiškina, bet ko reikalauja, tai pagrindinė magnetų ir gan paprasto principo veikimo. Ir tas gana nenutrūkstamas ratas.
Tai jūs čia norit sukurti amžiną variklį, taip sakant?
Amžiną variklį mes tai sukursime, nes kaip mes ir trečias termodinamikos dėsniai mums neleidžia. Mes realiai žiūrim į vėjo turbiną, tai mes tiesiog nuo vėjo turbinos nulupam tos frenus, kurios sukasi ir tas stovą, mes tiesiog paimam tą boksą. Ir mes priverčiam judėti. Be vėjo.
Ta prasme, tą patį, kaip sakant, ašį suktis, ne? Ok, o tas principas, kurį jūs, kaip sakant, bandote įgyventi, ar jūs turit kažkokį pilotą, pavyzdžiui, kaip tai veiktų?
Mes dabar statom dabar testuojam, dabar jisai tiek veikia, tiek neveikia, mes dar imprūvinam, mes dar grįžtam prie praeidžiamo lento žiūrių, ką galima imprūvinti.
Ok, tai pas jūs šitas pratimas, aišku, jisai yra visai kitoks, kadangi pas jūs yra techninė inovacija, ne? Tai jum yra svarbu parodyti, kad tai prototipiniu kažkokiu ar simuliaciniu režimu veikia, ar ne? Ir tada klausimas, kaip jūs tai galite teisingai pozicionuoti ir komercializuoti, ne? Arba kokie žingsniai yra toliau. Tai tas, kaip sakant, value proposition, ko gero jūsų yra ne tiek, kiek galutinį produktą padaryti, bet kaip nueiti iki to momento, kaip jūs savo iš pradžių prototipą validuojat ir patvirtinat, o po to jau gaunat kažkokį finansavimą arba kažkokį būdą tą prototipą upscaling, kad jisai kuo arčiau judėtų realaus pritaikymo. Ne? Tai super, tai prasme, idėja yra techninė, jinai gera, jinai tiek gera, kiek jūs gali deliverinti techninę pusę.
Bet jau tada savo pajėgumais tą techninę pusę iki to prototipą. Jeigu toliau pasiseks, tai jau pozicijų investuotojų.
Jo, tai ta prasme, jeigu iš tikro ten yra, ta prasme, jeigu aš, žinai, kiek pats fiziko žinau, tai klausimas tada, žinai, kodėl tai dar neegzistuoja, bet galbūt jūs suradot atsakymą, tai tada labai gerai. Tai va. Tai pas jūs yra B2B, yra kitaip, ne? Jūs ta prasme, jūs neinat selint, čia irgi dar priklauso nuo to, kaip sakant, technology readiness level, ne? Jūs neinat selint galutiniam klientui, jums dar reikia vystyti technologiją ir reikia parodyti, kad jūs reikia. Tai, kadangi pas jūs tas value proposition labai paprastas, mes generuosim kilovatvalandę pigiau negu kažkas kitas, ne? Tai vat jūs ir turit parodyti, kad ta, kaip sakant, matematika, simuliacija ir prototipas iš tikrųjų validuoja tai, kad tai pagrindžia tai. Tai su tokiom didelėm idėjom, ko gero, labai svarbus tie namų darbai, ne, kad lyginti dabartinę kilovatvalandės generacijos kainą, ten wholesale, ar iš ko jinai susideda, arba kokie va tie, nu, galima lyginti pagal tuos power purchasing agreements, kur kažkam atiduoda parkus pastatyti, ir jūs tada turit kažkaip atlikti skaičiavimus ir pasigrysti technologiškai, kad kažkokį scale pasiekus galima būtų tai daryti pigiau, ar ne?
Na, realiai, skaičiau, kas atvažiam, bet teoriškai longra, mes kadangi nenaudojame jokio fossil fuel.
Jo, bet saulės panelės irgi nenaudoja jokio fossil fuel ir jų kaina krenta.
Saulės nėra energijos.
Jo, bet tu pasistatyk bateriją ir bus visą laiką energija. O ir jų ir baterijų kainos krenta pakankamai. Tai klausimas, ar jūsų technologija gali turėti tokį patį pigėjimo kreivę, kaip saulė, ir kuri jau yra, kaip sakant, upscalinama ir į kurią yra daug investuojama. Ne? Taip pat su vėju, taip pat ir vėjo turbinos jos tobulėja. Netokių galbūt intensyvumu arba greičiu kaip saulė. Tai va čia tame ir atsiranda tada ne tam tikras value propositionas, nes yra kažkoks bazė, nuo kurios jūs atsispirėt, bet pasaulis irgi nestovi vietoje, kitos technologijos irgi pinga, ne? Tai jūs potencialiai turit kažkokią kreivę, kitos technologijos irgi turi kreivę ir jūsų value proposition yra visiškai techniškas. Reikia būti padarius pakankamai namų darbų apie tai, kas egzistuoja, ir jūs pakankamai gerai turit būti pasiskaičiavę savo technologijos šitus, kaip sakant, parametrus, ne, kažkokias prognozes. Tada dedi du grafikus ir galvoja, čia kažkas gali būti, net jeigu prototipas veikia. Tai namų darbų daug, bet good stuff. Gerai, kad, kaip sakant, aš džiaugiuosi, kad energetika Lietuvoje gyva. So I didn't hear that many phone calls. What's wrong? Are you afraid to call? If you're afraid to call your dad, call your mom, call your grandma. I'm not sure if they're your ICP, but still. You have to go out, you have to validate. Like really guys, this is a key thing where a lot of business fail, because you just like, you fall in love with your idea, you have a lot of visions in your head, and you don't communicate them enough. See, more people are playing some kind of fruit ninja than calling for validation, right? Sorry, you called? Sorry, I was there. I'm just joking, it's fine. So you called 2 people?
Yeah, but those said about more people like them, and they're very interested in that idea, and they said, what is the quantity that we need? And we said, there's no quantity requirements for this.
Good stuff.
And I have some people who also would be interested in that. So we are going to discuss about this thing. It's already 150 people. Because he said that he asked 100 people during this market thing, yeah, and he called.
All right, good stuff. So you got some feedback that the product would kind of fly. Good stuff. Note it down. Kind of put it on paper so it doesn't go away and disappear with all the other stuff that has to go around. Has everyone finished their calls? I assume yes. Right. So let's move on. We don't have too much time left. So this is going to be an exercise, and it's the last one. And it's the first step at really kind of spending more time on this and nailing this. So by now, I mean, if you felt that it's really difficult to think about your problem, it's very difficult to think about your MVP, it's really not nice to validate stuff and ask and go out and do that. Like, don't do a business, because properly doing a business and not wasting time is doing this in micro kind of iterations every single day. So every single day you pitch something, you pitch a feature, you pitch a plan of how you're going to implement some type of a part of your solution, and every time you need to convince everyone that that's a good idea. If you don't want to do that, then go do something else. Go to academia, do research, lock yourself down for 3 years, drink coffee, have a good time. Business is different, and it's fine to kind of learn and understand that business is not for you. However, if you feel that, okay, this was hard, but I want to get better at this, do so, and the only way to do it is to do it again and again and again. So second point, if you don't like doing stuff again and you don't like homework, don't do business, because it will go nowhere. It's always about doing it again and kind of failing and doing it again and then doing it better and then failing probably about 15 more times until you get it right. Or not, there's no guarantees. Right, so with that motivational speech, let's go for the last exercise, because I still want to kind of leave some time for you to read this and for us to have maybe a short discussion. Let's do it in such a way that if you have, you have your ICP defined, so that's the for part, right? So you have kind of an idea of who you are doing things for. You have the second part, which is who is looking for or is challenged with, which is kind of like the problem. So for high-income families that struggle with getting healthy food, right, that would be kind of your bit maybe, or some of it as an example. We have developed a solution, something, right? A painkiller that addresses that problem. That helps, improves, generates, or saves, optimizes, and so on and so forth. Something, right? Some value driver, some benefit, and probably there has to be a nice sort of pinch of salt on top or a cherry on top about the secret sauce. Like if it does something that someone else's solution does as well, what's the secret sauce? How are you doing it differently? How are you doing it better? So try to put all the stuff that you've developed today into this like one. So this is not even an elevator pitch. It's like a sentence that you kind of need to iterate to that extent that it would become a perfect pitch, like a perfect one-sentence pitch for your solution. Like, what value does your solution have? So spend 10 more minutes. You can change the structure if you want. Don't feel like locked in. But the idea is that you kind of, in one sentence, you put what your target customer is, what pain or problem that you're solving for them, how you are doing it, and what value that generates. So spend 10 more minutes on that, put it into a sentence, and then we'll have to share. All right? Is it difficult? Is it easy? How is it? It's good? Makes sense? Does it connect? Good. Have you guys finished, or does anyone need more time? It hasn't been 10 minutes, but still maybe we're, you know, amazing, miracle workers. Is anyone still working on the sentence? Yep. Okay. Has anyone finished? Yes? Yeah, you're good? That's the idea. You have to connect everything that you came up with before. So guys, let me know, is it genuine thinking and working going on, or are you all on Facebook or Snapchat? Translation going on. Sorry? You're working with yourself? Oh, sours. Oh, to do translation? Oh, okay. You're adding some sophisticated wording. Good. So probably you have academic experience because you're taught to kind of always crack up the sophistication a bit, right? Usually in business you don't need that. The simpler you say something, the more likely it has to succeed. If it makes sense, you can say it in simple words. So yeah, if it makes sense, you don't need sophistication. Are you doing it with color pens as well? Is that a color pen? A marker? No, just a pen? It's okay. Usually it makes sense to use colors. It makes you more creative. It helps, especially when you're tired. Like we are now after this 1.5 hours. Okay guys, let's take a break and we'll start maybe sharing and discussing, because it's kind of like the last thing. I would like to kind of get you thinking and get you to understanding that, again, building a business or building a solution, a product, it's not like a one try, one take kind of thing. So who in this room really wants to become a business owner or a founder? Please raise your hands. All right? Yeah. Keep them raised. Yeah, how many? Okay. Cool. All right, thanks. Who in this room wants to get a well-paid job in a corporation? No, this is like, you don't want to be a business owner, you want to work with a team, good team, doing good stuff, right? How many? Great. Who in here wants to be a freelancer and work, do like, gig economy, running from one thing to the other, being a digital nomad, so on? How many? Cool. How is that going for you? It's all right? Okay. Cool. So I think it's an important exercise because sometimes, when we talk about entrepreneurship, we talk about, oh yeah, being a business owner is so cool and blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, like if you want to be a business owner, you have to understand that a certain amount of your time or part of your life you will have to spend in a way that you don't want, with no guarantees that anything good will come out of it, so that when something does come out of it, you can have maybe a bit of a better lifestyle. And honestly, especially for some business people in Lithuania, their lifestyle and their happiness can be a lot better if they're freelancers or if they work in good companies and so on and so forth. So don't be afraid, like don't be wowed by the headlines, don't be wowed by, I don't know, VentureBeat, TechCrunch and so on about how cool it is to be a founder. Yeah, it's cool to be a founder, but you're only hearing about the 10 ones that it's cool for, and then you don't hear about the 90 other ones who failed, and then, they're not enjoying it that much. Having that said, I mean, all of us, I tend to kind of assume I'm young as well. All of us are young, so we have multiple attempts, right? We can fail a couple of times, and usually that process of failing and learning something can be reapplied for better things later. So again, in Lithuania, we have this problem that we think, if I screw up, I'm done. I'm done for life. If I took if I put my sights on a big idea, on a big goal, which is complex, and I failed, oh my God, I'm a failure. My life is done, which is stupid because that's not how things work. So all the people that have done anything in their life, they have failed multiple times. No one is born with the ability to kind of glide through life in a perfect way. So it's good that you have ambitious ideas. It's good that you want to change the world. You kind of need to get from what you are capable of to what you want to do. And usually that gap is filled with, lots of talking to people, lots of doing the stuff that you don't like to do, like validating, like calling others, lots of talking to smarter people, lots of hard work, lots of homework, lots of sleepless nights. So if you want to go through that because that thing at the end motivates you enough, do it. And ask for help. There's a lot of people in the university, in the ecosystem, in companies, in the government that really want to help you. Having that said, don't waste your time. Because at the end of the day, just like today, it's not me that is doing the business for you. It's yourselves that are doing the business. So this is just a tool that you've done once. And if you want to get to the end of something, you'll have to do it like tens or thousands of times before it gets to something. So if you're up for the rough ride, do it, and everyone will be, on that. There'll be a lot of people that are on that ride with you. If you don't want to do it, there's a plethora of good alternatives that also help you kind of, impact in a positive way the world and the way things are going. There's lots of great initiatives that we have in Lithuania that, we're sort of optimizing our public sector and clearing up inefficiencies, and there's very smart people working with that, and it's usually a lot of fun to be working with that as well. So don't think about entrepreneurship as, this sort of like push or this jail that you have to put yourself in to be a founder. Think about it as a way of thinking, as a skill to kind of really take a problem, really think about it a lot, do lots of homework, do lots of validation, and then solving it. That's entrepreneurship. And you can be an entrepreneur in a business, in a company, in your family, in public institutions, and we all, in all of these places, we do need the entrepreneurs. So kind of have an open mind, talk to people, don't be afraid to ask questions, and try to be always in the room with someone smarter than you. That's sort of my my general conclusion of today. So because we're at the end, and you've put down some stuff, again, don't be afraid to share it. We need to kind of, maybe share a few examples and have a bit of a two-way discussion. So who would like to share their final customer value proposition statement? No take. Okay. Oh, 3. Good stuff, guys. Begin. Your hand was first.
Sure. So 4, it's going to be for self-actualized individuals who typically will have an above-average income, who are challenged with finding novel sources of locally grown healthy food. So to solve this, we have developed an online platform that directly connects small-scale farmers to health-conscious consumers that will help with, it'll both contribute to their health goals while also establishing a local food production system that promotes sustainable agriculture and introduces buyers to a larger demographic of farmers.
Good stuff. So, it's kind of a pretty long statement.
Yeah.
You've put down a lot of, it feels like you've put down a lot of thought into it. There's, a lot of different kind of angles that you're trying to cover. I think as a concept, it's okay, but you could try to make it a bit simpler because there's a lot of content in that. Having that said, I think, you're challenging an area that also has a lot of different angles to approach it. So sometimes you kind of need to spend maybe a bit more time to explain what your uniqueness is. But still, I think it's maybe a bit too long. You need to kind of work on it more to narrow it down so it kind of flows a bit better. Like, for who, why would they care? Okay, what's the value? That's just for the statement, but in general, just thinking about from experience about the demographic and the value proposition that you're talking about, in nowadays, like especially for this middle to high income people, families and so on, every service provider, every digital provider fights for their attention, right? So the question is how or why you're going to win this attention fight. Because these people, they have stuff to do. There's a massive push for platformization. We don't care about apps. We want everything to happen on Messenger. We want everything to happen in one place. So you're creating a new thing that has to grab part of that attention. So kind of really try to nail down why or how you're communicating your value so that you can grab that attention. Because there's a lot of businesses that try to grab that attention and they're really struggling. So that's why it needs to be really simple and narrowed down. So even if I don't know what you're doing, you come up to me on the street and you say, okay, this is my value proposition. Would you like to get healthier because of organic food? And I'm like, okay, yeah, if I won't have to waste time on it and it will benefit me, sounds cool, right? So you need to it has to be a one-liner that is universally kind of convincing your target demographic.
Big picture of it, or keep it more to the point for the specifics?
Probably for the specifics. If you can make it work for the specifics, then that will eventually grow out into the big picture. Okay. Because for a person to buy an organic produce, they have to care about the produce, not about the world. When they're making the decision, they're buying food. They're not saving the world. They like the idea that while doing that, they are saving the world, but at the end of the day, they're still buying food to kind of, consume and then operate. Good stuff. Okay, let's go there.
So, if hipsters that are looking for services or products they themselves cannot get, we have developed a platform that will help them find their desired goods.
Did you say hipsters in the beginning?
Yes.
Cool. Okay. So why do hipsters need help in finding products?
Because hipsters are usually people that are interested not buying stuff, maybe lending it or borrowing it.
Okay.
It's like
the differentness that is driving the whole thing.
Because
okay.
They want to be different, they want to save the environment usually, so we're targeting that audience.
Okay. Do you think it's a big audience? Can you make a business out of it?
In Lithuania, probably not that big. In other countries, it's probably quite large.
Okay. So you're trying to be different. Aren't you afraid that there's a lot of big brands that are trying to do the same thing? Like, we're boring, but this is our sub-brand that is really interesting.
I've seen pages that offer similar things, but they're usually pages, not apps.
Okay. Yeah.
Usually pages and they're usually for like old people.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody really uses them, or we use them in maybe like a village. But here it'd be like in a city more like.
So would you be your own customer?
Sure.
Okay. So this is an important sort of example because there's like the pro side and the con side. The pro side of being your own customer is that you're kind of like, if you feel a pain, if you feel a problem, you are more likely to develop a painkiller, which is good. The con side is that sometimes we're only creating solutions for the problems that we have, and no one else has them. So I think for you it's important to kind of, if you think that you've nailed down some kind of like different business model, different angle, is try to get to that validation as soon as possible. So it's not just you, but you go to random people on the street. I guess if it's hipsters, it's kind of like really easy to see who you need to go to on the street. And then, kind of like ask them, would this be cool? If you're doing an app, it's not like, it's zero costs to test your idea. Take a piece of paper, draw probably an iPhone because it's a hipster, and then just draw the design, of what the thing is going to be happening in your app. So you need like 3 or 5 pieces of paper, and you need to be running around these, I don't know, Kablis or other places, and I don't know. I'm not obviously. So you go around, run there, and ask these guys. I mean, the whole process doesn't sound hipsterish, but sometimes you need to do the stuff that you don't like to do to get, a business running. And the feedback that you'll get, if you actually use it, you might actually get somewhere. So, for me, it's really hard to comment because I personally have like 5 maybe apps that I use. I have more, but I have 0 time. So the ones that I use, and everything else is just noise for me. So I'm like totally not your target demographic. So I'm in no position to comment anything. So for you, the most important thing is to go out there and get this feedback. But good stuff. Very clear, very targeted. That's what usually investors want. So as long as you can show like validation and traction, things can happen. Thank you. Please.
Okay, so for those who's looking for a way to contribute to the environment, we have developed a simplest way that helps to make it free.
Okay. So you're coming at it from a very sort of global perspective, right? But you're not mentioning anything about the product itself. So it's difficult to understand. If I would have, but if I wouldn't have heard that you want to do hemp cups, I would have like maybe 7 things about what I would be thinking of. I would be thinking. Okay, so you're pitching. Yeah, but you see, it's kind of like it's kind of difficult because I would argue maybe I came up with a thing that's easier.
Yeah, we need visions for this. I was trying to work according to your thing. I wrote as well the other thing, which is like ideal customer type is. So our producers for someone who is ecologically conscious, socially responsible person who not just keeps home waste, but directly contributes to his immediate and global environment. So you see, it's not that thing itself.
Have you called any coffee shops?
No.
Do that, because these guys, this is your key stakeholder. Because it's going to be the coffee shops that you're selling to, and I can like. There's a lot of these ideas and attempts that have been done in the past. Some of them worked, some of them didn't. For you to kind of really accelerate and feel if you're going anywhere, you have to call the shops. You and the shops, the coffee guys, they are kind of hipsters themselves. So if you go into a coffee shop and ask for like the phone number of the manager that you want to speak about cups, most likely they'll give you the number. Yeah, but just don't. That's the next step. Like, call the shop, tell them your idea, try to get the feedback, and be open about about any feedback or advice that they want to do. So don't waste time to create lots of concepts and homework until you call the shop. You have the idea, do it quick, validate it quick. If they will be supporting it, then start working on that based on what feedback they have and based on what things they will tell you to focus on. Right? But good. It's clear. The vision is big. You need to narrow it down and really speak to the shops right now. Yeah, there's no, yeah, you can award yourselves with a coffee in one of the coffee shops and also do the work at the same time. This is called work-life balance. Okay, anyone else?
We can.
Yes, yes we can.
Yes, we have two.
2 ideas
Yeah.
and 2 solutions.
Yep.
Okay,
2 sentences.
2 sentences.
Yeah. Like
2 alternatives.
2 parts for the same thing. Because as I mentioned, there are 3 things in one.
Okay,
So that's why I split it into 2 propositions.
okay.
Okay? So the first, for artistic makers who are looking for good selling, we have developed a special market that helps for new people find new gifts.
So it's a gift platform.
We just call that gift, but it can be anything actually. You can buy just a thing in there. It's just the way of words choosing.
Okay, what's the other one?
Okay, then for well-being people who are challenged with finding a new and equitable places to eat, we have developed a restaurant with greenhouse that helps you to enjoy more.
Okay, pretty clear. Pretty clear. It's kind of difficult to understand how I will enjoy more if it's a greenhouse, but it's a concept, right? It's a working thing. Good. I think one important point that I want to kind of add, maybe, and this is not the this is not the customer value kind of proposition workshop anymore. But for a lot of you guys that are thinking of creating new apps, new websites, new platforms, it's a business that is real if you can combine whatever you make from the customers of your business to whatever it costs to acquire a user and have the first part that's a bit bigger. So this is why I was saying, like, it's really hard nowadays to grab customers' attention. So I'll just give you an example. For example, with fintech, right? Who uses like Swedbank or SEB for their banking and they have the app? All right. Who uses Revolut or N26 or Monzo? Okay, right. So because it's sometimes like you have to be 18 to get Revolut and so on. So usually like students are underbanked. The problem is, for example, now when you try to be a new challenger bank, the average customer acquisition price for Revolut is 1.5 euros. Right? So it's really cheap because they've scaled up. They spent money. They did a Kickstarter campaign. It's really good. It's cheap. If you come up with a new fintech startup and you're saying, oh, I'll do a bank for young people, how are you going to get to your target audience? How are you going to convince them? Some of them will hear you and they will say, yeah, I don't care. So usually your customer acquisition cost may be between 5 to 10 euros. And whatever you get from the students may be lower than that. So your user lifetime value is lower than your customer acquisition price, which means that there is no business. So for a lot of you that are doing these apps and these platforms, it's good that you have the value proposition nailed down. You think that you have a target demographic. That's the start. But then don't stop there. You have to start thinking about the business. So how much does it going to cost you to get a user? Because sometimes for these platforms, what you do initially as a business person, you run out like physically and like wait for people to register in your app or download it. The question then is scalability. Are you going to run around the world and to get everyone to register on your app? Probably not. So it means that your business is not scalable and it is hard to develop further. Then there's other cases where you have a really great product. Like for example, I would go to that unique gift shop because I constantly I'm quite busy, so I buy gifts just before the birthday, right? So if I would have an efficient place to kind of find unique stuff and look at, instead of going to like, Acropolis or Rosas and just kind of flick through stuff quickly in an e-commerce site, and I would know about it and I would know that there's on-demand delivery, I would definitely pay more money for that. I would pay a transaction fee for that. But the question is, again, how much will it cost you to inform me that there's such a tool? And how many of me's are there? So how big is the market, especially in Lithuania, right? So if you think it makes sense, the value exists, it exists for you, you have to go out and validate and see, okay, so how difficult will it be to spread the message around? Because there's marketing costs and so on, and all of these tie on to user acquisition costs. And whatever business I have, how I am going to make money. So again, it's not kind of CVP anymore, but it's the next stage. Same thing for you. Like if you are going to support the lifestyle of hipsters, you have to think, how are you going to spread the word and how are you going to make money? It's good. The value may be there. It's a niche, right? So you can really nail down the user experience and so on. But you have to then think about, okay, where's the business in that? Can it be sustainable? Can it scale? Can I get the message out in a relatively cheap way and so on? Cool. Is there anyone else? Guys? No? No? Ladies? No? Why not? Have you written it down? Partly, okay. So what challenges did you have? Where did you get stuck? Did you get stuck in somewhere with these bits? Was something hard? You couldn't finish something, or what happened? Say it in Lithuanian. Lack of ideas. Lack of how to formulate the value. Okay, what's your product? Okay, and you couldn't explain what value it has, or what was the challenge? Yeah. Okay. It's challenging. There's been a lot of attempts. Sometimes you need to spend more time. Again, I would suggest speaking to someone closer to kind of like the area. Just off the top of my head, maybe it's a person in Vilniaus Vandenys or another municipal water company, like water treatment company. People kind of know this stuff. So speak to them, ask them. If you can get through to them easily, if you can't, ask someone in the university if they know anyone. That, even if you don't have the full sentence written with all the 4 parts, talk to them about the idea and about the 2. The feedback that they will give you will probably save you a month or 2 on getting stuck and wasting your time back and forth. So it's for you, especially if you get stuck, the closer that you speak to a person that works in the field, the more likely you will get unstuck or choose another place in which you won't get stuck at all. Right? Anyone else?
Okay, so it's for middle and higher income young parents, about 25, 40 years old that have preschool children from 3 to 7 years old, and parents who are looking for better communication with their children and want to increase their chances of better well-being later in their lives. So we developed the app that is a research-based solution that helps parents with their children to increase critical thinking skills and so to increase their chances of success later in life.
Amazing. I really like it. You really nail down very specifically what you're doing, who you're going to sell to, what's the product. So in terms of from what I heard now, I'm really interested. I do know that this children app thing is a huge market. Then the key question that I would like to follow up with is to kind of really understand. You mentioned research-based, so kind of I'm giving you a credit of trust that you do understand what you're talking about. But then the key question for any person wanting to use the product or invest in the product is, okay, so how good is the product? Is the product is it really for children? Is it tailor-made?
No, the product is
for parents. Oh, the parents use it to use it on their children. Okay, cool. So the parents have to kind of like the way, when they use the product, they have to like the way how it helps them interact with the children. Okay, so it's a hard thing to do because it's a very emotional thing, right? So it can either work or not work, and you need, again, it's the same. Customer acquisition versus how much money you're going to make. But in terms of a value proposition, it's very clear. So you have a very specific demographic, you have a specific target, you clearly define and put some good tick marks, so good job. Anyone else? You all want to leave? Okay. Mm-hmm. Have you guys worked in any farm? Have you spoken to any farmers? Okay. Have you spoken to a retail chain that gets the produce to sell at their place?
No, we're also thinking about the website.
Okay. Yeah, but have you spoken to a retail chain that does this business, that kind of has the supply chain? So do it. You need to understand how things work. You need to speak with farmers. You need to speak with retail, like smaller ones. You need to get through to someone in Aibe, for example, because these guys have, like smaller shops. It's easier to talk to them. Go through to them, pitch your idea. They will tell you the 5 most difficult challenges that there are to get this done. Like really start talking to the people that do this, that buy up the produce and then they sell it through retail chains. They transport it and they sell it. So it's not the website that is important, it's the supply chain that is important. So talk to them and get them to give you insights. That's how you're going to learn in the quickest way. All right. So I think we're out of time. If anyone does have any questions, we can chat, or we can, if you want to leave. If you want to ask questions, ask, or you can pop me an email at that place. That's the work email. So thanks for your attention. Again, I'll leave you with one idea. Iterate. Nothing happens from the first go. Talk to people, learn stuff, come back to the drawing board, do it again. Good stuff and good luck.